Coming up to 7:06 on your Friday morning and 7 degrees. Over to Dave.
Thank you very much. And Lonnie Balby joins us here because, you know, whenever marriage or divorce is in the news, we got to call Lonnie and say,
Call me.
What's going on, Lonnie? So let's just, I mean, we've heard the tapes before. Let's play a little bit of Baldwin, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what happened. So this is...
I want you to know something, okay? I'm tired of playing this game with you. I'm leaving this message with you to tell you, you have insulted me for the last time. You have insulted me. You don't have the brains or the decency as a human being.
So, and we don't need to play the whole thing because we've heard it, right?
Yeah, everybody's hearing this.
So this is the Baldwin situation. We'll talk Hasselhoff too. What's going on?
Well, you know, I think this is crazy. It's a crazy time. It looks crazy, but you know what's going on is parents are getting into these battles and they're putting the kids in the middle, and it's the wrong thing to do. And what the courts are doing is they're taking out the baseball bat approach, right? This is the baseball bat, and they're saying stop doing this. They take the hard end of the bat and they say to them, look, enough with this stuff. And that's why today what we're going to do is I'm calling this the baseball bat theory of law, and sort of hitting people over the head and telling them enough's enough. Enough's enough. And so we're hearing about this on the celebs. You know, it's making big news. You know, we saw something from David Hasselhoff, right? The same kind of thing. And the courts are stepping in. They're saying enough with this stuff, you guys. Stop putting it in the news. And quite frankly, what's going on with your kids? How are you affecting your children when you do this kind of stuff? It's crazy.
Now, is this just Hollywood? Is this just stuff you'd see there? Does it happen in Alberta and Calgary?
You know, that's a good question. I'll tell you you know, it's making big news in the States, and we're seeing it, but it's happening here all the time. In fact, I'm going to tell you a little story. I pulled out a case when I knew I was coming on here. There's a case just about a month ago out of Edmonton, you know, a sort of a local case. So here's what happened. There's a 3-year-old boy. Mom and dad are fighting like crazy. They can't agree on anything, right? They're fighting back and forth. They're fighting over the pediatrician, and they're fighting over, you know, the food the child takes, allergies, everything. This is a 3-year-old, right? And the judge goes through all of the details of what these two are fighting about. And then he says, I mean, this is interesting. You never see this in a case. To both these parents, I say only one thing. Enough, he says. Enough. And he talks about, you know, which one is a good parent and which one's a bad parent. And both of them actually are decent enough parents, but they fight like crazy. And that's where the courts then use, you know, this is where I'll bring out the bat again. They use, we'll call this the soft end of the bat.
Right.
And what they do is the soft end of the bat would be, instead of sort of hitting them over the head and telling them, you know, I'm going to send you to jail or something like that, what they do is they say, they require them to take the parenting after separation course. So you know, we're lucky we have that. We have a course here that all parents have to take to sort of learn a little bit about communication. Then there's a course that you can take on communication.
Yeah.
Okay, so to learn to communicate better, because that's one of the biggest problems when people are going through this is communication. Then there's one on high conflict divorces. Then, of course, there's a lot of emphasis on mediation and what we call alternative dispute resolution. Sort of ways to try to reduce the conflict, keep things out of court, and try to deal with things, right? So those are the sort of the softer things.
Now, can I jump in? Because I'm curious, what is it, though? Like, you see a lot of it. So do you ever step back and go, you know what, if they'd only blank? You know, I know there's courses, but if they would just knock off the blank, everything would be...
We always like to say, if they could just get along.
I know.
But they can't. That's the problem. They can't get along. So what we do, I mean, you know, you're trying to change their behavior, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're trying to do. And two people in conflict, often what we find is people are in conflict early on. You know, when the separation happens, sometimes there was an affair, something like that, and so there's a lot of hurt feelings. Usually things get better in time. For most people, they do. Most people. But there's a small percentage, maybe 5%, of really high conflict people that no matter what you do, you're never going to get them to change their behavior. And that's where we use the harder end of the bat, right? And that's where the courts step in, and that's when sometimes they do something called parallel parenting. Parallel parenting is where you have two parents where when the child is with one parent, that parent makes all of the decisions and doesn't have to communicate at all with the other parent. And then when the child switches and goes to the other house, then that parent does all of the you know, everything, all the decisions around that child. So what happens is you can have these two different, it's almost like two different worlds. It's not the best for the child, but it's reducing the conflict. Doesn't always work. It's rarely ordered, but it is out there. That's one of the things. Sometimes you have sole custody. Sometimes you have supervised access. Sometimes you have, you know, in real extreme cases, one parent could be cut off from the child. Very, very rare to do that. But those are the harder ends. But yeah, it's a crazy area,
Yeah.
and we see it, unfortunately, way too much. We don't see it much in the news here, but it's happening.
It does happen. And is there
Unfortunately.
anything, like, can you do anything about it to avoid that happening in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dave. Because I mean, you talk. I think it's really important. One of my things is at the very earliest stages when you're meeting with people in my business, you know, you deal with that issue and try to talk to them about how do you reduce the conflict. And the number one thing that psychologists will tell you. I know you've had Dr. Wendy Froberg on this show lots of times. They'll tell you that the number one thing that hurts kids in a divorce is conflict. Conflict. So what you'd need to do is talk to people about reducing conflict early. I know that it's easy to get stuck into that. You know, there's going to be a fight. You're going to start to talk about things. You're going to get into a battle. But you have to engage in that battle. So you need to learn to back off on that. Don't get engaged in the battle. Reduce the conflict. You reduce the conflict, your kids can do fine.
Right.
Actually, studies have shown they can do very well. It's the conflict that hurts the kids. So how do you deal with that at an early stage? You know, you need to be educated about that.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, geez, if I can prove to the court that person was doing something bad, you know, that I'm going to make sure that every time that child comes back, I'm going to check them to make sure that they weren't touched, because, you know, because if that's the case, then I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to make sure. Then you're increasing the conflict. Now, you know, if it's appropriate, if there's appropriate things to look for, that's obvious. But for most people, it's not appropriate, and what happens is people just fight about it, and it just gets awful.
It's wild.
It is fascinating.
And it's good to know that we can be responsible here. It's not just the crazy people in Hollywood. That happens all the time.
That's why I thought it was so interesting that we talked about this. Is that we're hearing about what's going on in Hollywood, but it's happening right here in Calgary.
It does happen. Isn't
Absolutely.
that wild? There is a website if you want more. Balby and Company. There you are. If you want to find out more, or if you need a good place to park during the Stampede. Okay, that's not true. FamilyLaw-Balby.com. If you want more help or information, he's there for you. It's so interesting. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for bringing the bat.
Yeah.
Good of you to come by. We got your weather coming up in just a bit. When is it going to rain? There's rumors that it's going to rain. Is it going to ruin the whole weekend? Apparently, not quite so bad. We'll tell you in a bit.
You can't have you.